Hey, I'm T.A. Charlie, and welcome to The Road to Concord with Professor Joe Bakanovic. Homeroom is on Rumble. You just go to Rumble and search the channels for The Road to Concord. It's one word. When you find it, you go ahead and you click follow. It might mean you got to set up an account, but it's fast, it's easy, it's free. I did it, you can do it. For those technologically challenged members of the class, you can also catch us on Facebook and YouTube. After the show, it's uploaded to Podbean, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and BitChute. Just look for The Road to Concord. You can go to the blog page, that's theroadtoconcord.com. That's where you'll find all your show notes, study notes, and handouts for the class. The phone is working. If you don't know how to call in, email us and we'll think about it. Finally, you can email a professor at joe@theroadtoconcord.com. He's a little slow, but he'll eventually get around to emailing you back. This show is currently mainly listener-sponsored. If you are interested in advertising your business on the show, please email us. With that said, we ask for your participation on a value-for-value basis. If you find our show of value to you, then you provide an equivalent portion of your labor and treasure through the donate link on the Road to Concord blog page, the show description on Rumble, and in the comments on the other streams. And thank you to all of you who have and will support this show.
Good morning. Welcome to the Road to Concord. Today is Tuesday, January 13, 2026. I'm your host, Joe Bakanovic. Today we're going to start what will probably be a two-part lesson on philosophy. It was requested by one of your classmates. It's going to be I've done this once before, but it was just cursory. I wasn't focusing on teaching philosophy to the extent that I'm going to try and do it today and probably we'll finish this Thursday of this week. We're not only going to be talking about philosophy, what it is and how you do it. We're also going to be demonstrating it, illustrating it by doing philosophy live, right on air. So before we even get going, we're going to start with that first demonstration. I want to point a few things out to you real quick. And the first thing we have to remember is we don't live in a void. We must avoid modern biases. When we start to try to actually think, you can't allow yourselves to get caught or trapped in the now. We don't live in that void. Like I said, there is a past, and it lives on. History lives in this sense of the way. It provides continuity of thought. It bears witness to previous discovery or conclusion in human history. Examples would be man has known that the earth is not flat for a very long time. Man has known that the earth is not the center of the solar system for much longer than we realize. Man has known that the earth and the solar system is not the center of the universe for much longer than we realize. But because we've lost, touch with history, we allow it to taint our understanding of the present. And that's a problem. See, nothing in or about the human experience is neutral. What do I mean by that? Well, it's all relational. How you relate to each other, to society, to the universe, and the state of reality. It's all neutral. It's not neutral. It's relational. Now, that's not necessarily the same regarding reality. There is probably an objective or neutral reality, but the problem is that, we're limited in how we can perceive it. Now, that means, in a lot of folks that, depending on your political bent, are going to have a problem with what I'm about to say. Please listen to me. That means that what is real is relative. Now, I don't necessarily mean what's real for you is not necessarily real for me, but at the same time, yeah, I am saying that. And that's true for a lot of people, for all of us. It is. What's real is relative, and it depends on your philosophy. Like I said, that does not mean that objective reality doesn't exist. It means that we are acknowledging that we are limited in our ability to know it. And by knowing it, I mean fully understanding it, being able to explain it, not having any other open questions. So, in this sense, what's real for us is literally a choice. Yes, what you decide is real. What you decide about the nature of reality and how you're going to live, it's a choice. We should choose well. That is what philosophy is all about. And that's what we're going to be looking at today. Now, I've done a blog post for today, and you can find it on the roadtoconcord.com. And this is where class 581, when the class is over, when this show is over, I'll post it up here too, along with a PDF of the slide presentation that I put together, so that all of the information I'll be using today will be available to you. And, it's all down here. It's hyperlinked. This is how I give credit to those who deserve the credit for the things we're doing. All right, this is the start of our slide presentation. Like I borrowed this meme or picture off the internet. All the different types of things dealing with philosophy. All right, let's hold on just a second here. Get my computer to behave for me. So we'll start with why philosophy. Well, colloquially, how we use language in the common ordinary day, what we talk, say tabletop, or kitchen table language. Philosophy is connected to our beliefs, the things we believe to be true or false. And more formally, philosophy deals not only with how we see and understand our world, the nature of reality, but also with the process by which we form our beliefs about the nature of reality. So it's about the process and our conclusions. And we can use the same word for both, and we'll get to that in a minute. Together, these two sides of philosophy, that's my term, form the foundation of the concept of the ideal life and our beliefs about how best to live that ideal life. That's what we decide what life should be, how you should live it, what's the meaning of life. Thus, they determine everything we do, how we act and react to the people and events around us. Now, I know there are some people who have a philosophy that says that it's biology and environment that determine what we do. The very fact that they say that proves they're wrong. If they cannot show me how their nurturing and their biology and their environment led them to conclude that nurturing and biology and environment are what determines that they were going to say those things, then they've just defeated their own assertion. And that's just simple logic, folks. They chose to see things that way. And therefore, you choose how you act. And yes, nurturing, biology, environment do influence human behavior, but they do not decide it. And that's part of what we're talking about. That's part of determining your personal philosophy. Ultimately, whether we will be proactive or reactive in the way we live depends on our personal philosophy. This has a great deal of influence on our physical and emotional health as well as our physical prosperity. And I don't mean prosperity as in getting rich. I mean how well you do in this world. Are you happy, content? Do you have meaning in your life? Those with a well thought out philosophy tend to deal better with the uncertainties of life, while those without a thought out personal philosophy, they usually feel lost and adrift on an unpredictable sea of chaos. The purpose of this class is to help others learn about what philosophy is and what it isn't, and how it can help them develop a well-reasoned personal philosophy. It's to help you live a better life and have more control over yourself. And now we know that this is a Bible-based show. Well, the Bible tells you have to work out your own salvation. Well, that's works, Joe. Well, you see, now this is the thing. Christians will get into that argument between faith and works quite often. And that's because they don't pay attention to history or the philosophy that led up to it. Say philosophy. That's faith, Joe. Faith has nothing to do with philosophy. Hold on to that. We'll get back to it. But this is a scripturally based, Bible based philosophical worldview show. So for me, I know that I do have to work out my own salvation. What that essentially means philosophically is I have to decide what is and isn't true. And once I've decided what is and isn't true, I have to decide how best to live in that reality that I've determined is truth. For me, truth is the word of God, the revealed word of the Creator, Yahweh. So I have to live. How best do I do that? Well, luckily for me, I don't have to struggle with that. It's been provided for me in the scriptures. But that does not mean that I don't have to wrestle with those scriptures to understand the concepts in them and how they apply to the world in which I live. Now, for the person who says that there is no creator, you got to figure out, how do you put meaning in your life? How do you know what the ideal life is supposed to be? How do you live it? You've got to wrestle with a whole different group of, I mean, it's related, but you got a whole different problem on your hands. We don't have that here. That's not our worldview. That does not mean that a non-believer can't get something out of this show. Quite the contrary. They'd probably get a lot more from this show than a believer will, but we'll see. Next slide. Reinventing the wheel. Before we get going, just a note I want to make. I am more concerned with teaching this material than receiving any type of credit for it. Others before me have already explained various aspects of the subject matter. A lot of them do it better than I do. Therefore, I have no need to produce my own explanations. Rather, I will use and credit those sources, the people who have gone before me. See, I understand history a little better than most. Not that I understand the history and what it means, but I understand what it means to me. All I do that may be different or unique is knit all those different sources together for you in an attempt to explain how all these different pieces combine into one larger picture. I put puzzles together, folks. That's it. That's all I do. Fair use and credit. All material used in this presentation is used under the term of fair, the terms of the fair use practices, and is fully credited on our blog and also here within the show. The link to this page with all the credits is provided for you in the description of the show. So, what is philosophy? Well, I have in your show notes this little PDF. It's a little slide presentation. We're going to go over parts of this. And we're going to do philosophy in the process of reading through the first half of this presentation. This is from SlideServe. Somebody else put this together, and it's fully credited on this page. You can go find out who did it. But I have a problem with it. Now, I'm sharing it with you as a teaching aid. But I do have a problem with this presentation. I'll explain as we go. They say the beginnings of philosophy. The word philosophy literally means love of wisdom. It can be traced back to the 6th century BC in ancient Greece. A series of thinkers were making inquiries on comparatively secular issues. These thinkers asked their questions through reason and observation rather than through traditions or revelation. These thinkers were the first philosophers. All right, right here, I want to stop. That's not true. That is a bias. That is a modern day bias. The first philosopher was the first person to start thinking. When you understand philosophy in its colloquial terms and its applicable terms, how we apply it in the world, well, then the book of Job would be our first recorded philosopher in history. Now, the book of Job is thought to be the oldest book in the Bible, but it also goes back to That story is not just unique to the Bible. The story of Job, in one form or another, goes back to a city of or Smur. That's where we get the oldest recordings in history. Job is philosophical in nature, through and through. It's just not Greek philosophy. So because something doesn't take the form that you dictate it must have, that doesn't mean that you do not have that thing. If you say that the only ice cream in the world is chocolate, well, I got vanilla ice cream and I actually prefer vanilla ice cream. Well, Joe, that's not ice cream. Wrong. You've just committed a fallacy. Okay. You're trying to put me in a box of what I can and cannot agree to. That's not truth. That's not reality. It's faulty reasoning. There have been philosophers for as long as there have been human history. For example, I've got a book that I cannot wait to read. I've got to get through a few other things I'm doing for this show first. But this is Biblical Philosophy, a Hebraic approach to the Old and New Testaments by Drew Johnson. And he argues in the beginning of the book, how do you define philosophy? What exactly is it? I have another book. It's by Thorleif Ballman. It's Hebrew thought compared with Greek. And it's about the two different philosophies. Well, properly understood, no human being that functions in the world. Now, I'm not talking about those with birth defects or mental disabilities. I'm talking about those of us who can function autonomously. None of us operates without a philosophy. All of us do philosophy on a daily basis, most of the time without ever knowing it. So this idea that philosophy started with the Greeks is wrong. Classic Western philosophy didn't even start with the Greeks. That would be classic civilization, but not the West. If I want to do an inquiry back into history, we're going to find that what we think of as the Western world was created by the blending of Hebraic thought in the form of Christianity and Greco-Roman thinking, Greek-Roman thinking. They were blended together to create the Western world. So this slide presentation continues. It says, philosophy, of course, is best known for asking some of the most difficult, important questions there are, such as whether or not there is a God. Well, this person who put this slide together just said that the philosophers were asking secular questions. Whether or not there is a God is not a secular question. So he's already demonstrated in his language. Now, I don't know if you see this. You might be saying, well, Joe, you're assuming things. No, this is logical extension. I'm applying logic to the slide. What it's telling me is the underlying philosophy of this author. I'm not criticizing the author. I just told you we all have these biases. The language that the author used is telegraphing their underlying philosophy. You'll see as we keep going that I'm not incorrect about this. So he says whether or not there's a God, how one can know anything at all, and how a person ought to live. Folks, those are all theological questions. Those are all religious questions. That's not secular at all. And the Greek philosophers said so, if you read them. So the next thing here in this slide, it says, although philosophers deal with speculative issues that generally are not subject to investigation through experimental test, and philosophy is not considered a science, however, philosophy properly done is not mere speculation. Okay, I want to stop right there, and I want to look at some definitions. It said that philosophy is the love of knowledge and wisdom. We are here in the American Dictionary of the English Language, the Webster's 1828 dictionary. I looked up knowledge because this is how I do philosophy. You use these words. I want to make sure we're not committing an equivocation. Equivocation is an ever-present pitfall. It's a trap. That's when you use the same word to discuss two or more ideas. We must be conscious of this trap. We must avoid it. We must demand clarification. If you've ever heard me in a discussion, live phone call discussion with somebody who disagrees with me, I quite often will ask them to define their terms. I will stop them in the middle. I said, what do you mean by that? That's not trying to be rude. That is so that I'm showing respect, really. I want to understand what you mean by the terms you're using so that I can better follow you. It's all about definition, and how we define a term frames the discussion. It tells us what we're discussing. It makes discussion possible. If we didn't know the meanings behind the sounds or the written words we use, we couldn't discuss anything. It also limits misunderstanding, and it provides clarity and civility. So I'm looking, what do we mean by knowledge? Well, I didn't want a modern definition of knowledge. So I went to the 1828 dictionary. It says, a clear and certain perception of that which exists, or of truth and fact. The perception of the connection and agreement, or disagreement and repugnancy of our ideas. Perception. of truth or fact. That contain. Remember when I started out and I said nothing about the human experience is neutral? It's all perception based. Well, that is that discussion I had that set this up is inherently implied or affirmed right here in the definition of knowledge by our founding fathers. It says we have no knowledge of that which does not exist. God has a perfect knowledge of all his works. Human knowledge is very limited and mostly gained by observation and experience. Okay, some people, the Greeks, thought you could gain knowledge through nothing but reasoning. You can too, to an extent. But the definition that we're given for philosophy is also wisdom. So I looked up wisdom because a lot of people think wisdom and knowledge are the same. Oh, be careful with that. That's equivocation. Same dictionary, wisdom, the right use or exercise of knowledge. If you've been with me any length of time, you have heard me use the term right reasoning. Right reasoning is just wisdom. You can have all the knowledge in the world. If you do not know how to use it properly, you have no wisdom. Now, the Bible tells me that the beginning of wisdom is the fear of God. In other words, I can know everything in the world, but until I fear the Creator, I will not use it properly. This dictionary is a Bible-based worldview dictionary. This is from Noah Webster. He was a believer. He says the right use or exercise of knowledge, the choice of laudable ends and of the best means to accomplish them. This is wisdom in act, effect, or practice. If wisdom is to be considered as a faculty of the mind, it is the faculty of discerning or judging what is most just, proper, and useful. And if it is to be considered as an acquirement, it is the knowledge and use of what is best, most just, most proper, most conductive to prosperity or happiness. Wisdom, in the first sense, or practical wisdom, is nearly synonymous with discretion. It differs somewhat from prudence. In this respect, prudence is the exercise of sound judgment in avoiding evils. Wisdom is the exercise of sound judgment, either avoiding evils or attempting good. Prudence, then, is a species of which wisdom is a genus. Do you see how much more exact the founding fathers were with their language? Those who came before us, they were wiser. They exercised knowledge more purposefully, more skillfully than we do today. They used language as a scalpel. They knew what they were doing and what they were saying. And they did it intentionally. They had a better, more well-worked out philosophy of life. So back to our slide presentation. Philosophers, just like scientists, come up with a hypothesis which ultimately must answer to reason and evidence. You keep using this word science. I'm not sure it means what you think it means there, Mr. Author. So back to the American Dictionary of the English Language. We just read the definition of knowledge and wisdom, which, philosophy. Science, in a general sense, knowledge or certain knowledge, the comprehension or understanding of truth or facts by the mind. The science of God must be perfect. Theology would be the science of God. In philosophy, okay, now the author just told me that philosophy is not science, but just 100 and something years ago, they considered philosophy to be connected to science. Let's listen. In philosophy, a collection of the general principles or leading truths related to any subject. Pure science, as the mathematics, is built on self-evident truths, but the term science is also applied to other subjects founded on generally acknowledged truths as metaphysics. Folks, metaphysics is pure philosophy. Or an experimental and observation as chemistry and natural philosophy. That's what science used to be called, natural philosophy. Or even to an assemblage of the general principles of an art as the science of agriculture, the science of navigation. Arts relate to practice in painting and sculpture, etc., etc. A principle in science is a rule in art. Science most definitely is connected to philosophy. Philosophy is science, depending on how you define science. and scientific. You see, the author of our slide presentation is about to tell you here in a few more different slides that he's not a believer, or she. So they have a bias, and they're attempting to account for their bias, but I don't think they're as aware of it as they should be. And it's in their language, and it's in the way that the author's describing things. This is applied philosophy. Why do I see these things? Because I have worked out a personal philosophy, and I've learned that these are the indicators that tell me that somebody has a different worldview from me. Now, that doesn't mean it's right or wrong or better, not in a neutral sense. To me, it would. But what it does tell me is how to parse the information they're giving me. It's a filter. It's judgment. It's wisdom. It's a biblically based wisdom. It gives me discernment according to the definition of wisdom. So I know that science is built on philosophy. Without philosophy, there is no science. So what is the relationship between philosophy and science? When properly understood, philosophy most definitely is science, the science of right reasoning. Okay, it's the science of the application of the acquisition of knowledge and the application of how best to use it. But there are two perspectives that will determine how we see science, what our personal philosophy is. We have to understand that when you have more than one perspective, they can all be wrong. But when we're dealing with reality, they can't all be true at the same time. Not unless you're working from a philosophical perspective of continuity. We'll be discussing that next week. That throws a monkey wrench in everything we're saying. But there's a reason for it. We've got to get through this class first before we can discuss continuity. So there's branches of philosophy. Traditionally, there are 5 main branches of philosophy. They are metaphysics, which deals with the fundamental questions of reality. Epistemology, big word. It means it deals with the concept of knowledge. How do we learn, and what can we actually know, and how do we know it? Logic, which studies the rules of valid reasoning and argumentation. Logic governs the application of reason in all these different areas. So logic is an overarching branch of philosophy. Ethics, or moral philosophy, which is concerned with human values and how individuals should act. Now, if you've been with me any length of time, you know that I do not like equating ethics and morality. To me, that's like equating knowledge and wisdom. They're not the same thing, not in my mind. Ethics is a man-made morality. Morality is a universal thing that was part and parcel of the creation. It comes from the creator. Ethics comes from man, in my mind. That's how I would argue it. So I differ with this author again. Aesthetics, or aesthetics, which deals with the notion of beauty in the philosophy of art. Although each branch of philosophy can be studied by itself in isolation, these branches overlap one another. One philosophical question leads to another and another until we cover all the branches of philosophy. Consider the following question. Should people give their excess wealth to the poor? That's an ethical question. Are standards of right and wrong built into the universe? That's a metaphysical question. It's also a moral question in my worldview. If we claim that people are justified in taking a particular stance on that question, are we making at least an epistemological claim, something based on our knowledge? How can we know that that's the justified choice to take? Furthermore, at every step in our reasoning, we will want to employ logic to minimize the chance of being led into error by making great complexity of these questions. We may very well look to some of the ethics and metaphysics and epistemological writings of past philosophers to see how their processes reasoned out these questions, how they've worked their way through it. I'm watching the time, Natasha. We'll be ready for a break here in just a few minutes. Other divisions of philosophy. There also exist other divisions in philosophy that focus on different philosophical traditions or schools. rather than the branches of philosophical study. For example, there's the general divide between Western philosophy, which puts its origin in ancient Greek, and Eastern philosophy. Well, he said that philosophy started with Greeks. It started much earlier in the Eastern and Middle Eastern areas, those worlds. So he's already told you that he's got a bias in his slide presentation, or hers. Continues that Eastern philosophy can be divided into philosophies of specific areas such as Arab philosophy, Asian philosophy, Indian philosophy, Hindu philosophy, Chinese philosophy, and so on. These areas have some overlap, of course. Some Eastern traditions are rooted more firmly in religious ideas. The demands of philosophy. I want to get through this before we go to our break, folks. Philosophy requires a brave mind, as you never know what your inquiries will lead you to. See, this is why I say you have to be willing to face the monster in the eye and be able to change your mind. Oftentimes, shaking your own set of standards and beliefs. A philosopher must be ready for consequences. Example, in search for answers to whether God exists or not, I must be prepared to accept upon discovery that maybe he does exist. Folks, if I had written this, I'd say in examining whether or not God exists, I have to be ready to accept the possibility that he doesn't. That would show you that I'm a believer. The way this question was phrased shows me that this person who wrote this slide presentation most likely is not a believer. Coupled earlier in the presentation with, philosophers deal with, secular things, and then promptly goes into all the religious aspects of philosophy. I could be wrong. The person who did this slide presentation may have set out to sound like they're secular. I don't know. But the way it is presented suggests that there is a non-believer's bias in the presentation of the material. That's not a problem. But this is me being aware of things. This is me actually practicing philosophy. The way I'm reading and explaining this to you is applied philosophy. So he says, philosophy requires humility, the acceptance that you do not know it all, and you must benefit, and that you may benefit from another philosopher's contributions, or even the acceptance that you could be mistaken. The demands of philosophy requires patience. Answers do not come easy to the philosopher. A question could keep you engaged for days, months, years. Even when you think you have reached the answers as a philosopher, you do not consider the chapter closed. I tell you that all the time. My two shelves. That's what I think I know. That's what I know about, but I'm not sure what to make of it. Philosophy requires more than one thinker. Your thoughts sharpen against the thoughts of another one like you. Like you is what keeps you on your toes for certain inquiry. That this is iron sharpens iron, steel sharpens steel. We help each other. All right, this is where I wanted to get before we go to the break. When we come back, we'll be back in my slide presentation that I made for you, and we'll continue. And there'll be some overlap. We're going to kind of like go back and start again. So we have a 3-minute break at the bottom of the hour. Natasha, if you would roll that, we'll see you in 3. Okay, we're back. Um, Let me just kind of do this again before we get going again. Philosophy, like I was kind of saying, put it another way, philosophy drives your purpose in life. And your purpose in life will drive the methods you use to achieve your goals. And your methods will influence the way other people receive what you're doing, especially like I'm thinking here specifically in forms of education. Philo means love of knowledge, love of learning. In education teaches you to love learning. Indoctrination is programming, the way I'm using this. How you receive your schooling, I guess I should have used that. Your schooling, is it education or indoctrination? A skilled or talented teacher is going to engage you in what it is you're learning and explain why it's important, and get you to be interested in the material, to want to learn, if you have a natural tendency to want to learn. Others don't. They don't want to learn. So you program them. The problem we have in our world is the majority of our schools are controlled by people with a philosophy where they think that they need to program the students because their ultimate goal is to reshape society. Now, if all of this is starting to sound a little like there's a religious aspect to it, yes, there is. All philosophy is religious in nature. And everybody has a philosophy, which means everybody is religious, even the atheist, whether they understand that or not. Which brings us back to, what do you mean by religion, Joe? That's why I told you definitions. Ask people what they mean by that. What do you mean by that? That's not a nothing question. So this is where we left off, our slide on philosophy. Let's go to etymology. Whenever I wanted to research what a word means before I start researching the concept, let's look at the word. What's it stand for? Etymology, it just means the history of the word, the provenance. How did we get the word? This is from the online etymology dictionary, word origins and more. Philosophy. The 1300s, roughly. Philosophy, knowledge, learning, scholarship, scholarly works, body of knowledge. From an old French philosophie, philosophy of knowledge, etc., etc. And directly from Latin, and then it goes back to Greek, which is philosophia, love of knowledge, pursuit of wisdom, systematic investigation. Oh, science. Is not that a possible, plausible definition of science, a systematic investigation? Well, the person who did our slideshow says philosophy has got nothing to do with science. And yet, in the Greek understanding, yes, it does. But didn't he or she tell me that all philosophy started with the Western Greek philosophers? See, this is what I'm talking about. I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm saying they're not as connected with history as they should be. And into the extent that I'm going to say, yeah, they did know the history, then they showed their bias in the slide presentation that they presented. And that's all it is. It's just a bias. In other words, they showed me their philosophy. When I say you have a bias, that's another way of saying you have a philosophy. I'm seeing your philosophy. All right. So it's a systematic investigation. It's from philo, meaning loving, or philo, and sophia, knowledge, wisdom, from sophis, wise or learned, a word of unknown origins. We don't know where it came from. It's got many spellings and variants in the English language. This is a continuation of the etymology. From the mid-14th century, it starts to refer to a discipline of dealing in rational speculation or contemplation. From the late 14th century, it starts to become natural science. It's starting to morph into a scientific way of looking at things. You're starting to enter into the age of enlightenment here. Also, alchemy, occult knowledge. In the Middle Ages, the word was understood to embrace all speculative sciences, things that we couldn't prove hard. See, the meaning is morphed. Well, this is important because if I'm reading an older text about what philosophy is compared to a newer text, they could have two totally different definitions. They're not even talking about the same thing. They're just using the same word. And if you haven't got a philosophy, right reasoning, if you don't have something worked out, a method or some sort of guardrails to help you understand things, you could think that these two different authors from 150 years apart are talking about the same thing when they're not talking about the same thing at all. And that will lead to confusion, which in a biblical worldview is Babel. So the meaning, the system a person forms to conduct their life, that starts at about 1771. That's how most of us think of philosophy these days. And I've already given you a partial definition that way. But that's all today. The word philosophy encompasses everything from its past. So the modern sense is the body of highest truth, the science of the most fundamental matters, is from 1794. Well, as late as 1794, philosophy was thought of as a science, and in 1823, it was still considered a science by the English dictionary. But today, that person who wrote our slide presentation thinks it's been divorced from science. So if I'm reading the founding fathers talking about philosophy, in their mindset, it's connected to science. So if I read the founding fathers today and I say, well, that couldn't possibly have anything to do with science. See, the founders didn't believe that philosophy and science were connected. Wrong. You've committed the fallacy of equivocation. You have assumed that the two words mean the same thing. Now you're understanding why I look at the etymology of the word and the definitions from older time and today, so that I can see what the word once meant and what it means today. That way I can understand where the concepts might have changed or morphed, and am I talking about apples and apples? This is crucially important. This is something that every journalist should be doing. Every blogger should be doing. They should make sure that they are defining their terms when they get into serious content that's meant to help people understand their world and decide how to live their lives. We don't do that anymore because we have been taken over in our society largely by a philosophy that doesn't value capital T truth. It values your truth is not my truth. Well, we'll get into that starting next week. That is a philosophy, but it's not one that's going to help a lot. All right. What is the definition of philosophy? We looked at the etymology, how we got the word, what it meant through history. Let's look at it today. American Dictionary of the English Language, Noah Webster, 1828. It's sitting over here to my left. I've got a copy that looks just like that book there. Founding Fathers, philosophy, literally the love of wisdom. Whoopsie, wisdom. That's right reasoning. That's not even the love of knowledge. That's the love of right reasoning. But in modern acceptation, philosophy is a general term denoting an explanation of the reason of things, or an investigation of the cause of phenomenon, both of mind and of matter. Folks, that is literally science. When applied to any particular department of knowledge, it denotes the collection of general laws or principles under which all the subordinate phenomena or facts relating to the subject are comprehended, an explanation of reality. Thus, the branch of philosophy which treats of God, etc., is called theology, theo being God, the study of God. That which treats of nature is called physics or natural philosophy. That which treats of man is called logic and ethics or moral philosophy. That which treats of the mind is called intellectual or mental philosophy or metaphysics. So this is where they're giving us the definition of the past. It's continued. The objects of philosophy are to ascertain facts, or that's the object of philosophies, the different ones, and the cause of things or their phenomenon. Again, that is science, folks. To enlarge our views of God and his works, and to render our knowledge of both practically and useful and subservient to human happiness. True religion and true philosophy must ultimately arrive at the same principle. Now, stop there for a minute. Let's say that I am not a Bible believer. Let's say I'm an atheist. Well, that is a religion. Atheism is a religion, whether they like it or not. It meets the definition. Most every definition I've ever read, it meets the definition of a religion. They can deny that. That's I don't care. You don't get to argue with the definition. You can argue about adding to or expanding, but unless you can make that case, unless you go through that process, and that you stand up to objections by people who disagree with you, and you successfully defend your new definition, You're stuck with the definition that that you come to the party with. So in this case, an atheist they're religious. Their philosophy must align with the principles of their atheism. So if an atheist tells you there's purpose in the world, they're going to have a hard time explaining or defining that purpose outside their own desire. If there's a right or wrong in the world without a creator, they're going to have a difficult time explaining it in terms other than what they think or they feel. Well, folks, if you are the ultimate authority of your worldview, by definition, you are a god. So the atheist's religion is self-worship. It's simple logic. It's applied logic. It's right reasoning. I'm following the definitions. I'm looking at what you're doing and I'm applying the definitions, and that's the conclusion I draw. It is sound, valid, and rational, and is entirely based on definition. Definition and the fact that you can't define anything outside of your own thinking, your own will. So this is why I tell you that there's no such thing as an atheist. They're just people who think that they're their own God. That's my philosophy. This is the New College Edition, the American Heritage Dictionary of the English Language. This is a modern dictionary from the 5th edition right here, the American Heritage Dictionary of the English Language, 5th edition, modern English. Philosophy, it's the noun, the study of the nature, cause, or principles of reality, knowledge or values based on logical reasoning, right reasoning. It is a system of thought based on or involving such study. It's a study of theoretical underpinnings of a particular field or discipline. And underline, whoa. What? Theoretical underpinnings. You know what that makes Sheldon Cooper in the TV series The Big Bang? Well, he was a theoretical physicist. No, you were a philosopher. Well, no, philosophy and science are divorced. They have nothing to do with each other. That's not what the modern definition of philosophy says. See, now, I was aware of this when I found that slide presentation, and I told you whoever put the slide presentation together was showing a bias, saying that philosophy and science have nothing to do with each other. Had they looked up the modern definition of philosophy, they would have found that, yes, they do. They are inseparably connected. So if you want to do science, you're going to be a philosopher, a highly specialized philosopher, but you are going to be a philosopher. None of us can live in this life unless, we're mentally incapacitated. You cannot live without becoming a philosopher. So the question is, how good of a philosopher are you going to be? Finally, the last definition, an underlying theory or set of ideas relating to a particular field or activity or to a life as whole. So why study philosophy? This is a picture taken from the link that we're using, theimportantsite.com. 10 reasons why philosophy is important. We'll try to get through this before we quit for today. It's by Emmeline Soken-Huberty. The Renaissance painting, The School of Athens, is packed with famous faces, including Plato and Aristotle, full of symbols. The painting is a love letter to the philosophers of the past. Today, our love letters look a little different than Raphael's masterpiece, but the world is still fascinated with philosophy. Why? Contrary to what many might think, philosophy is not a dry academic exercise without a practical application. Here are 10 reasons why philosophy matters or should matter to you and I. 1. Philosophy asks the important questions. No other discipline is as obsessed with the big questions as philosophy. Whether it's justifying human rights, pondering the meaning of existence, or figuring out the best form of government, philosophy has always steered humanity's curiosity. Since ancient days, philosophers have dedicated themselves to exploring the thought process while analyzing their thinking every step of the way. No question is too big or too small for philosophy. Analyzing their thinking, they were applying right reasoning. They were checking their logic to make sure they haven't made mistakes in their, the conclusions they've drawn or the connections they've made. Number 2, philosophy helps with critical thinking and reason. Besides asking the big questions, philosophy is all about the thought process. That's what science is a process of examination. Critical thinking and reasoning are a huge part of what defines philosophy. For years, philosophers debated on how to assess and categorize different styles of thinking, how to identify sound reasoning, and so on. The debate is always going on. When you adopt a philosophical mindset and learn to analyze statements and ideas with a critical eye, you become a better thinker. You're able to tell when an idea is worth your time or if it's relying on something that's inherently weaker and unsound. This is an essential skill that can be applied everywhere in your life. All right, let me stop just a little bit. Put that small up there in the corner. I went to college. I've got a philosophy degree. I'm a classically trained philosopher in that sense. Okay. I did that in the early 1990s. Even before then, I was already on that path. I have been a dedicated, what the world would think of as philosopher in the ancient Greeks, setting, the ancient Greek ideal of a philosopher for a long time. I have worked out my personal philosophy. I am constantly working on it. I am sharpening it. I am honing it. What this does for me is like what this author just said. The debate is always going on. When you adopt a philosophical mindset to learn to analyze statements and ideas with a critical eye, that is what I was doing with the slide presentation. Now, if that bugged you, I was doing that to set up this point in our lesson. I was applying the philosophy I had worked out, and these things were jumping out at me from the way the author worded their slide presentation. It implied a certain philosophy, a certain mindset, a certain way of thinking and looking at the world that is indicative. They were cues, little tells that is indicative to different areas of philosophy, different mindsets, different ways of looking at the world that I have come to associate with that. So for me, like I said, you're able to tell when an idea is worth your time or if it's relying on something that's inherently weak or unsound. I do this while you are still talking to me. It causes me to be rude because sometimes I will dismiss you while you're still talking. I don't mean to do that. I'm trying to work on it. It is rude. It's not the way I want to live my life. But people will be like, you didn't even let me finish. I didn't need to. You already told me your worldview, your philosophy. Now, for some of you who have known me for a while, you met me on Steve Nichols' show in Southern Georgia, the Morning Drive with Steve Nichols. And I encountered an individual who calls himself Richard Marks. And the very first time I encountered him, never knew him before, encountered him, he said a few things. And I told the host of the radio show, Mr. Nichols, I said, okay, he's going to say this, this, and this, and this. And the guy did that. He did exactly what I said he was going to do. And then he got on the phone and Joe doesn't know me. No, I don't know him, but I do know his philosophy. From a scriptural way of looking at things, I could say I know the spirit behind him. And in that case, I do know the spirit, as in a personal relationship with that spirit that animates him, which ultimately creates his worldview, leads to his philosophy. I have thought this stuff out so well, I process it while you're talking. And a lot of times I will have already decided where I want to go with you before you're done with a sentence. It's rude. I know that. This is why I'm an acquired taste. But people will tell me I can't do these things. Yes, I can. This is why. I've done the work. Now, all of you, I have no doubt, I'm just going to flat out say you'd be much more polite than I am because you're better people than I am. I've just come to assume that's the case in almost every case of everybody I ever meet. And there's reasons for it I don't need to get into. That goes back to the show that shall not ever be mentioned again. But you can learn how to do this yourself. And if you work through this a little bit, you'll start realizing certain people will use certain catchphrases, certain words, certain ways of thinking, certain ways of reasoning. And you'll be like, they are in this general block of philosophy here. Or they're in that general block of philosophy over there. And now you know how they see the world. It'll help you be better at discerning things. You, unlike myself, will probably sit and still listen to them to see if there's nuances in there. For me, the way I'm made, I'm broken. I'm a lot like Gregory House in the TV show House. Once I know that you're in a general field of worldview that I find irrelevant or boring or unuseful to me, Yeah, I tend to tune you out. I do. To the extent that I am likable at all, it is because of my faith and me trying to conform to the teachings of the Bible. Otherwise, a house would be warm and cuddly compared to who I'd be. I've got a friend, he's a classmate on the show here, who says I'm a sociopath. Not entirely true. I do care about people. I care about convention. I don't care about what you think of me. And that's different. That doesn't mean I'm a sociopath. I do care about right and wrong. I care about people. I care about truth. I just don't care whether or not you like me. I'm antisocial in that regard. And I know it. I know it. But a large part of it is connected to this. If you're lost in your thinking, if you're so muddled in your thinking that I can't even talk to you because you think a man is a woman is a man, and both of them can become a one-eyed, one-horned, flying purple people eater just because they speak it into existence, there's no reason for me to even start. You live in a world to which I cannot relate. Now, that doesn't mean it's not a valid world to you. It just means you live in an alternate universe, and there's no sense in even talking to you. And if you're one of those people and I just offended you, take it up with the person in your mirror. Okay. That's not my problem. And that's what I mean by me being broken. All right. See if we can get a little more of this done real quick. This is number 2. We are going to get through all 10 of these before we quit for the day. So we're going to run a little long, Natasha. Number 3, philosophy helps guide the research process. This is also very important to me. When you're faced with a research project of some kind, or you're researching a news article or anything that you want to look into to decide where the truth is, where's the lie, where's the propaganda, the amount of data can be overwhelming. Philosophy and its emphasis on analytical thinking and sound arguments help you sort through everything. You'll be able to tell when an idea or an argument isn't going anywhere, so you can focus your attention elsewhere. Philosophy also helps you develop your own position using clear, sound reasoning based on the research you've done. Charlie has come to know me so well that and there are other people out there who will send me articles in hopes that I'll glance at them. And usually I'm 1 or 2 paragraphs into the article before I'll say there's something here, or I'll dismiss it and say it's garbage. And I'm almost never wrong. Why? Because I have such a well thought out philosophy. I've learned how to do research so well. It's not that I'm anything special. I've focused on this to the point that if I'm an expert at anything in the world, it is sorting the wheat from the chaff. So people will ask me to help them with that. And I can't remember the last time I was wrong about this. I don't mean to be arrogant. And I'm telling you right now, I sort it according to my worldview. It's my understanding of truth and reality. But I sort it very quickly. The same reason I can sort what people are saying to me while they're speaking. If you want to get better at things like this, you have to spend some time in this. These are the types of things our schools should have been teaching our children when they were still in grade school. By the time you get done as a high school student, you should be processing things like this as you're reading it and as you're hearing the conversation. You should be able to do this. 8th graders should be able to do this. Number 4, philosophy teaches persuasiveness. It's also often called rhetoric. Besides critical thinking and reasoning, philosophy teaches people the importance of being persuasive. And I don't mean emotionally persuasive. Those arguments do not work with me. If you are going to appeal to emotion or appeal to the masses or appeal to popularity, I am going to dismiss you right while you're running your mouth. And I'll probably start talking over you because you are wrong. And I don't mean in my opinion. I mean you are factually wrong. Always. Every time. So, you can have the best argument in the world with lots of evidence, but if you can't get anyone else to see that, what's the point? Beginning in ancient days, rhetoric, the art of persuasion, was employed by everyone from politicians to lawyers to poets. When you study philosophy and rhetoric, you'll learn how to develop and present your arguments in a way that appeals to your audience. This is an extremely valuable skill no matter what your goals are. Those people who argue from appeals to emotion and popularity, they're after the non-thinking class, and they are manipulating those people. Rather than bringing them up, they are manipulating their ignorance or their sloth or their laziness or whatever you want to call it. For whatever reason, they do not care to become higher thinkers, emotional argumentation and appeal to popularity is always an attempt to manipulate and control. Every time. Every time. I have never found anything different. I've never found an exception to that rule. Comment on the board from Aaron Spikes. It says, I guess that's why the Bible says not to swear an oath by anything in heaven or earth. Not exactly. That comment in the Bible is because once you swear an oath, you dang well better keep it. Otherwise, you get the curses. So you can bring down curse on your own head when all you have to do is say yes or no and let your yes be yes and your no be no. But that is part of your philosophy, though, Mr. Spikes. Yes, ma'am?
I just realized he actually did post a comment beforehand that might have been in response to this comment.
Oh, okay.
So,
I see.
apologies for the confusion.
All right. Well, no problem. Keep up there, glitchy AI. Number 5, philosophy teaches problem solving. Oh, yes, it's very good at this. This is another thing that I excel at because I've put in the work. Problems are a part of life. No matter what type of problem you're facing, philosophy can help, no matter what type. That's because philosophy teaches techniques like observation, intuition, and logic. And all intuition is a subconscious jump, a subconscious logical connection between what you've seen or what you've learned in the conclusions you should draw. Using critical thinking and effective research, you can break problems down to their essence and test solutions. That's science. This is why you see me always go through the toppings on the ice cream, go through the whipped cream, get through the flavor of the ice cream, drive down to the ice cream. I'm just simplifying the problem. I am simplifying the fractions to get to the lowest common denominator so we can then do the math. Philosophy was developed as a way to solve problems in the form of big questions. It makes sense that it would be useful for any problem. Number 6, philosophy can be applied to every discipline. No matter what subject you're dealing with, there's a philosophical aspect that enhances the learning experience. In a sense, philosophy forces you to ask questions like what and why. And if you've listened to me, I'll say, well, what does that mean? You answer that question. Well, what does that mean? You answer that question. Well, why is this? What's the purpose? You just keep asking questions. I was once told that answers are easy. Asking the right question is the hard part. That has served me so well. It's always the question. In the TV show House, that's why he has a team. He doesn't need them, but the team throws out ideas and thoughts which spurs his mind until somebody asks the right question. The team just accelerates the character of House's thinking process. That's all it does. And sometimes, yes, they find the right answers, but that's because nobody owns the truth. And his team is talented in and of their own. But the genius of what House is doing is surrounding himself with other very exceptionally bright people to use them to spur him on. They ask questions. He answers them, which leads to other questions. It helps him find the right question quicker. So whether you're studying literature or science, the philosophical piece makes you ask, what is the essence of the topic at hand and why does it matter? Philosophy is all about critical thinking and reasoning, which are important skills in any discipline. They make the learning process more organized and rewarding. Number 7, philosophy is a good foundation for many careers. Now, I was once told that the only reason for my philosophy degree is to promote, to propagate other philosophers. That's not true. My degree has helped me a great deal in a great many ways and a great many different jobs since then. This says philosophy isn't just useful in a classroom or learning setting. It's an important tool for many career fields, including the business world. To succeed in business, a person must work through often complex issues, write persuasive arguments for a position, and research quickly and effectively. Critical thinking and reasoning are essential. This is even more true for legal professions. A career in anything related to science also requires a mastery of philosophical concepts and analytical thinking. Hence my pointing out that our slide presentation's author was not understanding philosophy as well as I wish they had. Any career benefits from a bit of philosophy. It isn't a subject that's limited to academia. Any career benefits from it. Number 8, philosophy helps you sort through your own beliefs, what you believe in the world. Most people go through life without questioning what they believe. I question it all the time. Philosophy asks us to take a closer look at our lives and worldviews. You might realize that what you've always believed about yourself, the world, and so on don't make sense anymore. Matter of fact, if you're growing in wisdom and personal, self-worth and philosophy, you should not be the same person today that you were as a child. Not in the way you think or act. On the other side, you might become more confident in what you believe. This is often why I get called cocky. I don't know a whole lot of things, but I know that I know what I know. Huh? The things I tell you I know why I know them. I can explain them in detail. And this is why I say that until you can explain it and teach it, you don't know it. You know of it. You may know a lot about it, but you don't know it until you can rattle it off. If you're one of these ones who needs to write a paper or a speech to be able to teach something, unless it's just because you need help with your organized thoughts, I question how well you know it. I'm not saying you have to be a perfect speaker, but I'm saying if you know something, you say, hey, I know NASCAR. I say, stand up and tell me about NASCAR. You should be able to stand up or whatever, you know what I mean, and tell me something about NASCAR for at least 5 minutes. And more than, well, go fast, turn left, and you got all these fancy, bright colored advertisements on the car. No. I mean, you should be able to get into the depth of what it is about the cars, how the rules work. That tells me you know it. You don't need to prepare for that. You may not be eloquent in your speech, but you'll ramble out something that actually, for somebody like me, I'll put the word vomit into order, and I'm like, okay, yeah, you do know it. Okay, because I can make sense of word alphabet soup as long as there's ideas in it. I don't need you to be perfectly ordered. That's part of the audience's job as well. Philosophy will help with that. So even if you don't ever defend your personal position with another person, the process of questioning and collecting evidence for your beliefs can change your life. So that's another reason. Number 9, philosophy influences the world today. While you may not be aware of it, philosophy has a huge impact on how the world works. Collectivism versus individualism. We have democracy. No, we have a republic because of philosophers. We have a republic specifically because those philosophers that tried democracy proved it doesn't work. You see, that's knowing your history and having a worked out philosophy of life. Many of these issues people wrestle with daily, such as how to be a good person. If you ever wonder why the world is the way it is and you look back at history, you'll find most things have a root in philosophy. This author is explaining to you that which I've already told you. I didn't learn it from him or her. This author and I agree because we have many paths to one truth. We've arrived at the arena of truth. We might be sitting different bleachers, but we're all in the arena of capital T truth. Philosophy can fuel change and progress. Most of history's biggest changes, whether they're cultural or political, began as intellectual debates. This is because philosophy is all about caring about everything, including the questions and the thinking process. Philosophy encourages the world to take a deeper look at why things are the way they are and if they could be better. That's how progress is made, or at least should be made. Now, if it's done intentionally, that's good philosophy, a good process. If it's done haphazardly without thought or construction or form or shape, well, then that's chaos. And it leads to just chaos. It leads to muttered thinking. So this is where we're going to stop today. We're going to pick back up there on Thursday where we just left off. We're going to start looking at how do you do philosophy. And we will finish this lesson. It is going to be imperative for the rest of this quarter semester system, this now and going into the spring. If you do not have these 2 classes under your belt, then when I reference back to them throughout the rest of the spring semester that we're in, you're not going to necessarily understand what I'm saying. That's on you. This is a class from now on, and it's going to more and more become a class. It's going to be treated like a real class. Up until now, I've been playing games. I know where I want to go. I'm serious about it, and it's because I'm fixing my life. I'm applying my own philosophy to my life, saying, hey, Joe, you got away from where you said you believed. That's another thing about philosophy. It's not what you say. It's not even what you say you believe. It's what you do. That's another principle. You will always do what you really believe. So if you find yourself saying, well, I hate sin, and you're constantly sinning. Well, Joe, Paul said he did that. But Paul was in a war with that sin. Are you? See, that's the difference. And that can help us. The Bible says that there'll be no fornicators and no liars and adulterers in heaven. Well, then that means none of us are going to heaven, because the Messiah said that anybody who looks at somebody with lust is an adulterer and a fornicator, and you're going to hell. But philosophically, are you a fornicator if you have those thoughts, or are you a fornicator if you don't fight those thoughts? You just go with them and you let them rule your life. If you're at war with it, is that what you are? Or are you born above, trapped in this world, in this fallen world, fighting with that sinful nature? You're not Gnostic. You're one person, but you're trying to purge the fallen nature out of your body. You're longing to be restored back to your transfigured self. That's how the biblical worldview looks at this. You got no way to explain that if you don't have a biblical worldview. You can't, let me take that back. You can explain it. You have no way to consistently, your explanation will not be consistent. And to a philosopher, if it's not consistent, it's useless. So this is why all of these things matter to us. If necessary, go back through this class again before Thursday. Get this under your belt. I tried hard to go slow. I tried hard to explain this and to be articulate in what I was saying. I tried not to talk down to anybody to the extent that I sounded like that. I don't mean it that way. It's just that I've been told by other people, I need to simplify this. I need to dumb this down. I need to make it real easy to digest. This is about the best I can do and still cover the material for an adult. So I hope I did all right. And I provided you with the links of all of this stuff. You can go look through it on your own if you want in the printed out form. Just go to theroadtoconcord.com. Check out your show notes for today. All right. Do we have anything on the board? Doesn't look like it. We're good. All right. I thank you for being here. Part 2 of this show will be Thursday, and we will finish however long it takes us. This is crucial information to at least be aware of and get under your belt, because I will be referring to this when we start our study on the Bible amongst the myths. Yes, it's the Bible. Yes, it will be very high-level apologetics, but it is philosophy. I will be teaching philosophy, and it will help you understand the 2 different worldviews. There are only 2. By definition, there can only be 2. And the 2 different worldviews drive everything in human history. And for the first time, I understand what history is, how it should fit into our world, how it should help us. And I understand how all of this explains what we would think of as the leftist or progressive or collectivist mindset. I get it. And I think I get it in a way I can explain to you. And if you do the work, it'll help you understand these people, where they're coming from and what they're reacting to. But it might also give you a little bit more of a heart of grace for them. Not tolerance, not acceptance, but grace. You'll understand their errors, and you'll understand why they refuse to abandon their philosophies. We'll get all that done. This book is very valuable. I might even put it up there with the Bible. For me right now, it is hand in hand with Dr. Heiser's Unseen Realm. And I don't know how I missed this the first time I read it. So I'm not overselling it. You'll see when we start on the book 1 week from today. And that is the Bible amongst the myths. So until we see each other again, tomorrow's Worship Wednesday. We've got some scripture things to discuss. Until we see each other again, y'all stay safe and take care. We love you. We thank you for being here. If we are doing anything that you appreciate, please hit the like buttons. If you've just found us, hit the subscribe buttons to wherever you're watching us on all the different media platforms we use. That way you don't miss out on any of our content. And if you're of a heart and mind, share the show and maybe consider, all we ask is a $5 cup of coffee every month. Go to the donate page and just sign up to give us $5 every month. It will greatly help us. Without those of you doing this, the show ceases to exist. I cannot afford to put it on all by myself. So that's just, up to you. Until then, we love you. We thank you for being here. Goodbye. Have a good day.